The NFL is terrified of what the Baltimore Ravens did in this past year's NFL draft, and the AFC North will be paying the biggest price. We'll be breaking down that and more right here, right now on Ravens Digest. Welcome to another episode of Ravens Digest. I'm your host today, Bryce Parker. And before we get started, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date to everything that's going on with your favorite football team. We'll be covering updates, trades, highlights, game analysis, everything that you need to know about this Baltimore team. We'll be covering it. So let's get started. We all know the Ravens that the Ravens had 11 draft picks this past year, and they used them very, very wisely. In the past week, we've seen a lot of draft analysts say that they're ranking the Ravens drafts anywhere from an A- to a B+. I personally just give them a straight up A because they were able to address every single need that they had this offseason from offense, defense, special teams. We'll get into that very shortly. Actually, we'll get into that right now. So, like we said, Ravens had 11 draft picks. The Ravens, when they needed versatility to go along with Kyle Hamilton, they got Malachi Starks. When they needed pass rush help, they drafted Mike Green to be an edge rusher to go along with Nnamdi Madubuike and Kyle Van Noy. When the future has been unknown with Justin Tucker, they drafted Tyler Loop, a kicker, to possibly be his replacement. When they needed help at guard and tackle and they needed depth, they drafted both Emory Jones Jr. and Carson Vincent, and they even got better in the return game with LeJontay Wester, not to mention the depth that they added on the back end. Not to mention the depth that they added on the back end with Longer Beam. This team literally got better on every single level where they needed help. And it's terrifying because last year, they were the ones that won the AFC North and were poised to go to a Super Bowl before they got beaten in the divisional round by the Buffalo Bills. And as we know, every single offseason, you're trying to chase the teams that beat you, but also the teams that won your division. And so every team's goal is to make sure that they're chasing that team with the AFC North. That's going to be the Baltimore Ravens this year. But the Ravens are actually pushing themselves further away from the pack. And I don't think any of the teams in the AFC North actually did anything they needed to do to close that gap. So, that being said, we're going to get started with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This team had a lot of uncertainty going into this offseason to solve their quarterback troubles. And honestly, I don't think they answered really any of those questions. They've been holding out for Aaron Rodgers, maybe hoping that they could trade for a Kirk Cousins if he becomes available if they don't get Rodgers. They had a glaring issue of quarterback that has not been solved. They drafted Will Howard. We're not sure if he'll be the starter going into this next season, but it seems like they drafted him as an insurance policy late in the sixth because of them not being able to get the quarterback they wanted in free agency. They didn't get the quarterback they wanted early on in the draft. So now you're looking at a quarterback room with Skylar Thompson, Mason Rudolph, and Will Howard, and then maybe holding on hope to Aaron Rodgers maybe. I don't know. I don't think this was a smart move for them in the draft. Now, I did like that they were able to pick up Derrick Harmon. I do think that gives them an extra edge rushing presence on top of what they have with TJ Watt. But overall, I don't think this team caught up to the Ravens at all, and it's going to be very scary when this is the team that's going to be maybe one of the Super Bowl favorites, and they're in your division. You're going to literally have to go through them if you want any chance of not even just a Super Bowl, but if you want to actually get into the playoffs. And so next, we're going to go with the Cleveland Browns. This team, they made a lot of decisions within the draft where I was like, I get it, but I don't at the same time. They drafted at number 2. You have 2 blue chip franchise players who could literally fall into your lap at pick number 2, and you traded away. You could have had either Abdul Carter or you could have had Travis Hunter, and you literally trade away the number 2 pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And what actually confused me even more, if you were going to go get an edge rusher in Mason Graham, then what was the point in trading away the number 2 pick? You could have just got Abdul Carter and stayed there. I don't understand that. But what I will say is that Mason Graham will add value with Myles Garrett. They do have 2 bookends, but I still don't think this team did what they needed to do to close the gap against the Ravens, especially with how good the Ravens are able to run the ball. And also, this team had more quarterback questions than the Steelers did. And then now you draft Dylan Gabriel and you draft Shedeur Sanders very late. You're not sure what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. I personally will be very surprised if he ever starts another game for this Cleveland team. You have Joe Flacco on the roster. You have Dorian Thompson Robinson as well. This is a quarterback carousel that can go any way throughout the season. A lot of dysfunction going on with this Cleveland franchise. And again, I don't think they got as close to the Ravens as they should have gotten for their team's goals. If I'm a Browns fan, I am disappointed with what happened with the Browns. Now, what I will say about the Cleveland Browns is I do think that they did get a very well-valued piece with Quinshon Judkins. I do think this can be a guy that can end up being a cornerstone piece of how you build your offense for the future. But again, did not do enough to catch up with the Ravens. And lastly, the Cincinnati Bengals. This is actually the team that I thought out of the two other teams actually did make some really good moves to get closer to the Ravens, but I just think that gap is just too wide. Now, they did draft Shamar Stewart, who can go along with Trey Hendrickson, who could actually end up being his replacement because we don't know what's going to happen with Trey Hendrickson past this season. He could be moving on as they gave big contracts to Joe Burrow, to Jamar Chase, and to T. Higgins. So I do like this pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, they were able to add depth on their defense. They did a lot of focusing on the defense. They got defensive tackle help. They got help with their interior linebackers. But I still do not think it's going to be enough to match up with this Baltimore Ravens rushing attack, who got better, who added depth on their offensive line. And as we saw last year, Cincinnati, this was a team that had problems with the run game. This is also a team who had problems defending. It's like they would score 50 points, but they would lose because they would give up 51 points. So, again, I don't think this team did enough, but I do think this could be the closest contender next year to challenging the Ravens. However, when you're the Ravens, who literally added depth or got better in every single position from offense, defense, special teams help, this is a scary sight for any team that's not wearing purple and black going into this next season, not only just for the NFC North, but for the rest of the league. Again, one of the scariest attacks just got better in the National Football League. So, again, thank you so much for joining Ravens Digest. Again, like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated to everything that's going on with your favorite team. Until next time, see you, be safe, and as always, go Flock.